In this bulletin, federal budget cuts provoke righteous indignation. Historic agreement signed to eradicate slavery. And Christmas goes large scale.
This is InFocus Christian News and Current Affairs.
Hello, it's great to have your company this week. We're on the downhill run to Christmas. Are you feeling it, Danielle?
I sure am, Kent. Well and truly ready for a holiday. But I'll tell you what, it's very much business as usual this week on InFocus. Lyle Shelton will be talking to us on what some church groups have described as the worst piece of legislation to pass through Parliament since the White Australia policy. OK, I'll be interested to hear his take on that. And you caught up with Doc Wright earlier. I did, Kent. He's got some interesting research to share on the correlation between obesity and bone stuff.
Oh, OK. I wouldn't have thought there was any connection there at all. Well, for today's guest interview, I'm going to be chatting with Barry Oliver, who does our Insight segments from time to time. He'll share his perspective on the struggle Christians are having with the forces of secularism. But now, it's time for the news. Thanks, Kent. Christian aid agencies are among the community groups raising the alarm over suggestions the Australian government will once again cut foreign aid. Under the previous Labor government and again under the current coalition government, the foreign aid budget has been cut. Previous bipartisan promises to increase aid to International Millennium Development Goal targets are looking increasingly out of reach. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has warned the foreign aid budget will not be off limits if her government cannot get other cuts through the Senate. Catholic charity Caritas is asking Australians to contact government ministers to share their concern. The Adventist Development and Relief Agency has also expressed misgivings.
If Australia were to cut aid further than it already has, and let's remember that 6 months ago it was the largest part of the budget cut, it would send a message to the world that we care about ourselves more than we care about anybody else. That, in other words, we're effectively a selfish nation. I don't think Australians are, but that's a little bit the way that we seem to be headed if we make further cuts.
And still on the federal budget, a proposed shift in education funding from Australia's public universities to TAFEs and private institutions has turned into a stoush over the separation of church and state. According to The Age, Family First Senator Bob Day has expressed his support of the changes, in part because they will see religious seminary programs supported by federal funding. But Labor and Green politicians have questioned the move, saying that religious organisations, not the government, should bear responsibility for educating clergy. The Senators blocked the funding changes. The government plans to reintroduce the funding plans next year with amendments. Over the next 5 years, congregations in churches, mosques and temples will hear the message repeated that slavery is forbidden by God. Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Orthodox, Muslim, Jewish and Buddhist leaders met in Vatican City to sign a pledge to work towards eradicating slavery in all its forms by 2020. Questions have been raised about the absence of representatives from evangelical churches, which, since William Wilberforce, have led the fight against slavery. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, the gathering of religious leaders is known as the Global Freedom Network, which is coordinated by Australian mining magnate Andrew Forrest and his 21-year-old daughter Grace. At 70 million, it's one of the world's biggest groups of largely unevangelised people, the deaf. But one church in Brisbane is doing its part to communicate the gospel effectively. For some years now, Logan Reserve Adventist Church on the southwestern outskirts of Brisbane has been using Auslan sign language interpreters during its weekly church services and other special events. The church has also made an effort to collect closed-captioned video resources.
It's my understanding that the Logan Reserve Church is the only one in the country that's doing anything at all like this, and I would really encourage at least one church in every state or capital city to get on board and do likewise, and we are happy to support you in this.
Next year, Logan Reserve will coordinate a church convention aimed specifically at the deaf from Australia, New Zealand and the South Pacific region. The world's most well-known worship leader, Darlene Zschech, says she's praising God after hearing from her doctor that she's completely cancer-free. After surgery and several months of treatment, Miss Zschech's doctor described her recovery as miraculous, although she will need to continue with checkups and medication for some years. Ms. Zschech says she's grateful for everyone's prayers and for the gift of the second half of her life that she says will be dedicated to God like never before. Darlene Zschech and her husband Mark pastor the Hope Unlimited Church on New South Wales' Central Coast. In the 2000s, young pastor Rob Bell was attracting attention with his contemporary approach to ministry and his Nooma videos that gained a worldwide audience. But after heavy criticism of his 2011 book on hell, Love Wins, he left church ministry. But now Rob Bell is aiming at a larger audience than he ever had at his 11,000-strong Mars Hill Bible Church in Michigan. According to Religion News Service, he's been on a speaking tour with Oprah Winfrey and will launch a new television show on her network later this month.
Pastor, rock star speaker, best-selling author.
Rob Bell!
Unconventional.
She's wearing a execution device.
Revealing.
This is actually the secret of criticism.
Your exclusive hour with Rob Bell. Sunday, December 21st.
It was a time of celebration at Pacific Adventist University in Papua New Guinea as 188 graduating students received their qualifications. PAU is a relatively small institution, but in PNG's rapidly growing economy, students are clamouring to get in. Only 7% of the 5,000 applications to study at Pacific Adventist University next year will be successful. This is a similar acceptance rate to some of the world's most sought-after universities. Christian tertiary institutions are widely regarded in Papua New Guinea as providing the best quality education available. A crowd of 52,000 has come close to packing out El Salvador's largest stadium, not for a football game, but to hear Australian evangelist John Carter. The event topped off public meetings held in 93 locations around the country and coordinated by local Adventist congregations. Pastor Carter focused on the person of Jesus and the biblical prophecies that predicted his coming as Messiah. By the end of the 3-week campaign, more than 4,800 people had been baptised, with thousands more making a commitment to Christ. Over the last 20 years, it's become a Christmas tradition for thousands of Aussies and Kiwis to take a walk on the road to Bethlehem.
For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. I will eliminate him from the face of the earth. That's what I'll do.
The Road to Bethlehem concept was first launched in Melbourne 2 decades ago. This year, 15,000 people are expected to participate in the live nativity experience, not counting the crowds flocking to similar events everywhere from Perth to Christchurch. Well, it takes a fair bit of effort to go bigger than the Road to Bethlehem events, but in the US state of Utah, local believers have successfully broken the record for the world's largest live nativity scene.
My name is Michael with Guinness World Records in New York. How's everyone doing? You had 1,039 participants, which is a new Guinness World Records title.
Crucial to the success of the record attempt was the angelic host, which numbered over 1,000. Well, Kent, I'm sure 1,000 angels on a hill would be pretty impressive, but nowhere near as special as what it would have been the night Jesus was born.
Oh, the real thing. Angels singing. I would have loved to have been there. I wonder what angels singing actually sounds like.
Well, I could show you that if you like.
Look, time's running away, so we'll take a short break. We'll be back in a moment.
You've heard me sing before, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
some of these artists from Salter Music. Anna Weatherup.
Oh, people get ready for the train to Jordan.
Castles in Air.
Like watchmen wait for the morning light.
Eric and Monique.
You alone are my strength, my refuge.
Sapphire.
His love reached the bottom of the ocean.
No matter what shade of musical taste you have, you might just find something that sings to you. It's all waiting to be discovered at saltermusic.com. Fresh and exciting original Christian music from Salter Music.
Hello, great to have you back. And joining us now from Canberra for the last time this year is the Australian Christian Lobby's Lyle Shelton. The last lap, Lyle.
Yeah, it is, Kent. The year's gone quickly, but that's the way it goes when you're getting older.
Now, Lyle, of course, Federal Parliament has wrapped up for the year. They finished last week with a bit of a bang, with Immigration Minister Scott Morrison just managing to get some amendments to the Migration Act over the line. But these were amendments that one church organisation described as the worst legislation since the White Australia policy. What were the major concerns there?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure, Kent, and I think that's probably a bit of an overreaction. The government's been left with a very difficult situation where there were record numbers of children left in detention. They've got that down by a dramatic amount, about half, and they're continuing to get children and adults out of detention. These changes through the Senate were designed to reintroduce temporary protection visas so they can deal with the backlog of claims, some 30,000 people that are still living in the community whose claims haven't been assessed. But the important thing about the change, Kent, was that the government has slightly increased the number of refugees who can come to Australia over the next 4 years, an extra 4,500 people. And that's a welcome development. I think we could be a lot more generous, but now that they've stopped the boats, they're starting to increase the humanitarian intake, and that's a step in the right direction.
But Lyle, I mean, it's to my understanding that there's been some criticism saying that essentially this amendment rips out the international refugee conventions out of our legislation with the non-refoulement provisions, for example, where basically the minister will be able to return people back to countries where they're likely to be tortured or killed again. Isn't that the case?
I'm not sure if that is the case. I've seen and read some of that commentary. I'd be very surprised if the Australian government sent people back into harm's way. And certainly if that was happening or happened, we'd be very much critical and alarmed at that. But my understanding of all this is it's designed to clear up the big backlog of unsettled refugee cases and claims, and also then to increase our humanitarian intake. The government has been very successful in stopping people smuggling and people dying at sea. These strategies are very important to clearing the people out of immigration detention, including children, and I think that's a good move.
Okay, well, history will judge us, I guess. Now, Lyle, onto another topic. It seems that retailers Target and Kmart have responded to community concern over the R-rated video game Grand Theft Auto 5. They've taken it off their shelves. But your organisation has been calling for some more fundamental changes, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right, Kent. These video games should never have been on shelves in the first place. We're calling on the classification board to do its job properly. There's no excuse for video games which have sexual violence against women to be part of an entertainment package. And clearly the guidelines say that depictions of sexual violence are not allowed, and yet these games have somehow found their way onto the shelves of retailers such as Kmart and Target. We'd also like to see Big W withdraw them from sale as well, but it's more important that the classification board does its job, and I think both sides of politics need to make sure it does.
Okay, thanks for that, Lyle. And of course, we wish you and your team a very blessed Christmas and New Year break.
Thank you very much, Kent. Thanks for having us again this year, and a very Merry Christmas to you and all your viewers as well. God bless.
Thanks, Lyle. And now it's over to Danielle and Health in Focus.
Well, if you've broken a bone or are afraid of breaking one, Doc Wright has some information that might be helpful to you. Welcome, Doc.
Well,
Good
hello
to
down
see
there.
you.
And nice being here, and hi to all our friends out there. I just love talking to my audience out there every few weeks. And today we are talking about overweight and broken bones.
Yeah, which is something we don't often think about.
We don't, because, you know, if a person's overweight and fat, you think they wouldn't break their bones, wouldn't you? Plenty of insulation. Not quite like that, because they found, and from the Harvard Health Letter, which I quote from often, Harvard, Massachusetts, the world's biggest information medical centre, and they have found just recently, after all these years, they've discovered that people who are overweight, the weight interferes with the body's normal production of growth hormone, which regulates, in a way, the bones.
Okay.
Now,
and does it weaken them?
Pardon?
Does it weaken them?
Well, the answer is yes. It weakens the bones. So if the growth hormone is not there, bones tend to become weaker. Now, this is a bone. Actually, I didn't bring the rest along. He's walking outside waiting for me to put this back. This is the hip bone. You often hear people breaking the neck of the femur. Well, that's the part there. So that's what a bone actually looks like. Usually we have a bit of meat around it. Yeah. You have meat on both of your bones, aren't you, Lucky? Now,
as long as there's not too much.
Yeah, not too much. So ideally, the weight, don't worry too much about the weight itself, because the weight or fat accumulates underneath the abdominal wall and also the visceral fat inside, which couches the organs. Okay. And the way we measure this, very simply, get a tape measure, measure around your navel at navel level, and the ideal is 93 centimetres or less for men and 60 centimetres or less for women. Okay. Now, if you do that, and it's not very hard, I'm only 90 around the middle, it's not very hard to do. Just eat a bit less sugar, get more exercise. The more exercise you get, ideally 30 minutes walk per day. Those are some of the simple things.
Okay, and drinking a bit more low-fat milk and yogurt, perhaps? Low-fat
milk is good because milk, dairy products, have a very high concentration of calcium. So, yes, low-fat milk is good. Actually, I just have water. That's got nothing in it. But also, I take some calcium tablets each day. There they are. You can buy any brand, cheap as cheap, and 2 or 3 of those a day, 600 milligrams each, or 2 or 3, 1,800 milligrams is what we should get per day.
Fantastic. Well, that's some great advice, Doc.
Yeah, I think so too.
Keep our bones strong and keep our weight down, and we should be right.
Absolutely, we most certainly will. So, goodbye everybody, and I'll go and start and have my lunch. Full of calcium. See you later.
Well, that'll keep you going for a while, Doc. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again after the break.
Signs of the Times, a magazine for a world on the brink. And this month in Signs, how to reclaim the true spirit of Christmas. Is God the Father the strict disciplinarian we've sometimes feared? Learning to rely on God through life's difficult times. Usher in the new year with a new, healthier lifestyle. All in this month's Signs of the Times. Subscribe to Signs this Christmas and change your life.
Hi, welcome back. Well, it's no secret that Christianity is declining in the West. Church attendance is lower than ever, and the numbers of people who declare in surveys and censuses who say they have no religion is steadily climbing. Here to help us understand what's going wrong and hopefully how to fix it is Dr. Barry Oliver. How are you, Barry?
Oh, well, thank you, Ken.
So, Barry, you're a church leader. You represent Seventh-day Adventists in Australia, New Zealand and across the South Pacific Islands. So are you, as a church leader, one of the people we should be, blaming for this decline in Christianity?
Oh, Ken, you made me take a deep breath then. But I guess the answer is, of course. Yeah. As a leader, I must bear responsibility. We all together must bear responsibility, because we don't want this to be happening. This wasn't Jesus' idea, I'm sure.
Well, certainly not.
Because I saw some research just the other day where, in fact, in Australia, for example, and I know some of our viewers come from New Zealand, across the Pacific and elsewhere, but in Australia,
the number of people who actually identify with Christianity has declined in the last 5 years from 62% to 52%.
Wow.
At the same time, the number of people who declare no religion in that 5-year period has increased from about 29% up to about 37%. So both of those lines are converging, if I can get the directions right, in the way we as Christians certainly don't want.
So what's putting them off? Do you get a sense that you know why?
Kent, if we all knew why and had all the answers, I don't think it would be happening like it is. It's a very challenging question, because Jesus' idea, of course, was that the gospel would go to all the world.
Yeah, sure.
People would have an opportunity to listen, to accept, to respond. It would go in such a way as it was appealing. It would go in such a way as it was culturally relevant. It would go in such a way as Christians show that they are quite capable of rolling up their shirt sleeves and getting involved in the community, doing all those things that Christians should do. But for some reason, it's well, let me not say it's not working, but it's certainly not working as we wish it was.
But I mean, church attendance levels are at record lows, but nevertheless, as you just alluded to, 52% of Australians, for example, still consider themselves Christian, and I believe the rates of people who believe that there is a God is even higher. Is that your understanding?
That's really interesting, Kent. I remember years ago I was teaching at Avondale College up on the Central Coast, and at that time the number of people who were identifying with Christianity was in the high 60s, but the number of people who actually believed in the supernatural, in God, if you like, was closer to 90%.
Yeah, wow.
I think the challenge for us is that many people are still identifying with the supernatural, with God, but not wanting to identify with traditional Christian church.
It's this whole I'm spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. And I wish I had the answer. I sometimes wish I could stand up on a street corner and say to her, hey, do you guys really know what this is all about? But that doesn't work, because people in Australia don't want to listen to someone particularly standing on a street corner. They are much more impressed by someone, as I said a minute ago, rolling up their shirt sleeves, demonstrating what Christianity really is like, I guess, in action.
And is that the key, do you think, for contemporary Christians today, to figure out how not just to talk the talk but to actually to live it?
I think that's certainly part of it, Kent, a very big part of it. Another thing is Australians, and we're talking about Australia particularly, and this will vary across the different cultures and countries. Australians are very impressed by people who are, and to use an old phrase, fair income.
Yes.
People who are people of integrity. You know, Australians aren't so interested in listening to fancy political or philosophical debate.
Sure.
They want to know that something works, and they can see it in the life of a person by what they say, what they do. They're more convinced by the power of a person's integrity than by the power of an argument.
That's right.
That's pretty much how we are in Australia.
It's not tell me what you believe. You know, show me what you believe by your actions.
Every day, and who you are.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to be a person who is able to stand up for what you believe. I've heard so many stories about Christians, maybe in the workplace or on the sporting field, who are a little different because of their belief system from others who might be around them. And people accept that as fine. And that's a good thing about us.
Australians are very accepting, aren't they?
We are, really. We accept people, we give the underdog a fair go. I hope that never disappears from Australian culture. Sometimes I also hear stories of Christians who do it tough, but ultimately I think we Australians are fairly fair-minded, and even if you don't agree with what I think, I'll still accept you and be prepared to call you a friend or a mate.
Yeah, sure. I guess there does come a time, though, doesn't there, Barry, where you do need to speak and you do need to explain, and whether publicly or whether it's one-on-one. Are there perhaps some pitfalls that we've seen from the past of, you know, evangelistic methods or ways of sharing the gospel that we just thought, well, that's actually not ethical? Because unfortunately Christians are famous for that, aren't they? You know, the bait and switch. You know, I'll promise you this, and then guess what? It's religion. You know, you didn't see that coming, did you?
Unfortunately, Kent, that has been the case on a number of occasions. Not always, of course, but It's very important that when Christians do share their faith, that they do it in a way that is ethical, a way where people are aware. We're not catching people at a time when they're extremely vulnerable, for example. Now, it is true that often at a time when we are vulnerable, we ourselves can reach out to God and realise He is there at those sort of times.
We're open to change.
But the end never justifies the means, if you know what I mean. We must be very careful and respect the freedom of choice of all individuals to make choices for themselves. And in turn, as Christians, we expect that to be granted to us as well. Freedom of choices is something we must hold on to as a culture and as a people always. Maintaining, of course, community mores, standards, etc., which we expect in Australia.
A word that's being thrown around a bit, Barry, is the word incarnational. I guess it's a word that's thrown around in Christian circles in particular. Can you just sort of explain to us what that means exactly and then what it looks like?
The word incarnation describes the fact that Jesus, who of course is God in the fullest sense, became man in the fullest sense, unique. And to be incarnational basically is to follow the example of Jesus, who became one of us for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of salvation. So in sharing who we are, we can become one with others, identifying with them in order to share the gospel where they are, so they can become what...
Do you know people who are doing this, like now, like in Australia, for example, or in other countries?
I think there are many, many people doing this. I think many of our friends in the Salvation Army do this very well. They really roll up their shirt sleeves. They go where many others wouldn't go in order to reach people who are in need. And many other Christians right across the board in all the churches are doing this. Great. I think that is something we need to do more.
So this is sort of in opposition to the attractional model, isn't it? Where I sit in a church, I put a big poster out the front and I say, come to us, come hear the gospel. The incarnational model is about me leaving the church walls behind and actually getting out to the community and being a part of that community.
It's very interesting, Kent. In the Old Testament, the attractional model was the model of Israel, where everyone was to come to Jerusalem, for example. In the New Testament, the model was to go out into all the world and go out in order to make disciples, being like Jesus.
It's more relevant than ever, I guess, the example of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for your time today, Barry.
Thanks, Ken.
Really appreciate it. We'll be back straight after the break.
Planning your future can be a daunting task. What you want to do, who you want to be, and the road ahead can often be unpredictable. No one really knows what the future holds. Avondale. It's education designed for life.
Hello, well, thanks so much for sharing the last half hour with us. We really appreciate your company.
Absolutely we do. We'd love to hear your feedback too about any segment of the program you might have seen today. We've got all the bells and whistles, email, Facebook, Twitter.
Yep, all of that. So please stay in touch. Have a great week and we'll see you next time on Record in Focus.
God bless.
Bye.